So Kelly, I apologize if I butcher your name.
That's okay.
But this is a Kelly Riback-Small, and they
Nailed it.
use they, them pronouns, and they are an award-winning executive creative director, designer, educator, and best-selling author of The Conscious Creative Practical Ethics for Purposeful Work. Kelly has worked in communication design, marketing, and advertising, and has a special focus on an ethical and inclusive practice. They are also an affiliated design researcher with Emily Carr University, Studio for Critical Making and Graphics Research Unit. Kelly holds a master's degree in design, where their research focused on design ethics, social impact, social innovation, and sustainability. And they have also received the Governor General's Academic Gold Medal for their graduate work. So thank you so much for giving us your time today. That was a very impressive list of accomplishments, and we're very excited to have you. So I'm going to start off the Q&A, but I've said to everyone already, people are going to just raise their hands and ask you questions as we go along. And you all have access to the questions document, so feel free to pipe in and ask some of those questions as well. So the first question on our list, and I think what we're all curious about, is why did you become a designer, and what has been your career journey so far?
Yeah. First off, thanks so much for having me. I've been really excited about this. So thanks for reaching out. Okay, go back a few years. I decided to become a designer. I was in high school, we'll say, was one of those kids who was extremely artistic and not very math and science focused. And so I knew I was going to go into journalism, something in the arts, or, visual arts and design. But I, at the time was a bit of an angsty teenager. I was reading people like Naomi Klein and Noam Chomsky, and I was feeling, a lot of sort of angst around the media messages that I was being sent as a young person, increasingly frustrated that I didn't ever see myself reflected. And I thought, design, graphic design, which was what I took at the time, really married, typography, messaging, communication, as well as, visual art forms of all kinds. And I just saw this incredible amount of potential in design, and I really went into it thinking, oh my god, this has the capacity to change the world. These are the folks that are crafting the messages that 10,000 people, what is it, people see something like 10,000 messages a day now. I'm sure it was a little bit less at the time, but regardless, that's a lot of potential for influence. And so that's really what got me started in design. I don't know, within that question, do you want me to go into sort of what took me from initially getting into graphic design to today?
Sure, if you're comfortable with sharing that with us.
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't mind at all. So try and put it in a nutshell. I, took my first design program. I took it at Algonquin College, which was amazing. I was actually talking to a couple of my professors recently from then, which, is so fabulous. They are amazingly talented people. And I loved design. I worked for a couple of firms, and then I just kind of accidentally landed in marketing and advertising. It was one of those things where, I was working in this tiny design firm. I loved my job. I loved the people, but nobody recognized the brands in my portfolio. And it was, I'm sure folks understand how that feels. It's especially when you're junior, it's nobody knows who I am. I need something that's going to stand out a little bit more. And then I got this opportunity. So I found myself working for everything from automotive through to tampons and toothpaste and household brands that people kind of understood. But what also happened, in that transition away from, mostly servicing nonprofits and small businesses, meant I was suddenly, facilitating this exchange between, consumers and these giant corporations. And I wasn't always down with the things they were selling. And, long story short, I did that for about 12 years until I hit a real ethical wall. After doing things like a great example is I was at one point on the creative team that was selling sunscreen. It was an aerosol sunscreen that caused people to catch on fire. The formula was so flammable that it was literally causing people like major, like 3rd-degree burns. And so, you know, at one point the client came back, oh my God, we have a PR nightmare. We need to create some creative that's gonna, you know, remind people that we're a wholesome family brand and everything's gonna be okay. And like, we use that as kind of the perfect example of these really challenging, you know, ethical kind of conundrums you get into, especially as a young creative, when you don't always feel like you have a voice. You know, I was already other in a bunch of ways, and I didn't really have like a playbook for, you know, what the hell to do with things like that, as well as like the microaggressions and the misogyny and the homophobia and like and like it all happens in workplaces, but there was really no playbook, and I didn't see too many people talking about it. And so come like 2016, I was working for a global digital firm, had some of like the coolest jobs in my portfolio. Like I did this cool like hologram thing that we dropped in the middle of the mall, and I was working for like Fido, and we did the very first 360 music video while I was there. Like it was rad stuff. But I was losing my mind because it was like, once I saw the ethics in the industry and sort of the lack thereof, I was like, I couldn't take it anymore. And so I ended up, like, real talk, and I try and be honest about this, like getting really sick, I think, from forcing myself to do things that were outside of my value system. I ended up with like shingles in my early 30s. I had like super brutal depression, like all of these things. And so I left, and I decided to just kind of quit the industry, and I sold everything I owned so I could like have some money to live on. And I went out west, and that's when I did my master's degree. And basically I just went into it. I spent every penny that I had to my name living and doing that, and just asked the question, like, is it even possible to realize an ethical practice in design and advertising and marketing and like this sort of sphere of industries? And at first I didn't think it was. I started reading things, and you know, honestly, it looked really grim. There were people saying, you know, you have to leave it all behind, you have to do something different, you can't be in service to, you know, commercial endeavors and the marketplace and still be ethical. And so I kept digging, and I kept digging, and eventually I found some thinkers who were working in ways that were, you know, affecting meaningful incremental change over time, subverting from within systems. And that kind of became the like core centerpiece of my thesis, which ended up being really what led to the book, and like taking all of that research, condensing it down into something a little bit more bite-sized. And that's kind of where the book came from. And that's really what brought me to today, and this belief in, you know, the power of, you know, all of us going in mindfully into our careers, into our schools, into like really anywhere we like take up space, and just really trying to like facilitate those small changes where we can. And the one caveat that I'll add is that, you know, a lot of people say, you know, incremental change is bullshit. They'll say that, you know, you have to like get out in the streets and make be loud, make that change that you want to see. And I don't disagree with that. I think those two things can coexist. I think we have to be honest about the reality of having to earn a living within a capitalist system, right? We all have to keep a roof over our heads. And that was the thing that I was struggling with when I first started reading all of this research, was like, wait a second, like, I don't have money, like I have to work. And how am I going to like work and earn enough money to like support my family, make sure my kid has clothes, and, you know, also make change. And so that was really the focus of this like hyper realistic book that I ended up writing, which was like, okay, you know what, folks, like we can do all of this at the same time without sort of telling each other that one way is wrong. You know, I think there are different ways in different contexts. So that kind of brings us to today.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think we all go through that in school, where we work on certain projects and we're kind of like forced into it a little bit. Like it's not something we care about, it's not something we want to endorse, but got to do it for the mark. And for instance, I worked on like an alcohol packaging project last year that had me not feeling the best, just because
fair.
I'm not comfortable with that. But it was interesting practice, and it did end up in my portfolio. I guess, does anyone have any questions for Kelly before I go into the next one?
I mean, I wanted to ask about like, how did you like start, or like what inspired you for your book? But I think you answered that question pretty well, and it's an incredible story. And I can't believe how you actually managed to do all of that and be who you are right now. So it's very impressive.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Honestly, I've kind of blown my own mind with the book. Like it's, and this is not to say that I'm on a New York Times bestseller list or anything. Like it's doing well. It's a Canadian bestseller, which is also great. But also just, you know, having gone from sort of the depths of despair truly to really pushing through like some tough times and like asking that question and like not being afraid of the answer. I guess that was like the coolest part to overcome. Really knowing that like if I arrived at an answer that was like, you're going to have to leave kind of everything that you had started, this whole network, all of your professional contacts behind, then I was prepared to do that. And also I'm very thankful that I didn't have to, because now I'm able to consult and, you know, especially I think at this point in my career, I can have a little bit more choice around who it is that I work for and work with. But I also like to say, especially like when talking to students, you know, for better or worse, I wouldn't take back a lot of the experiences that I've had in working on a lot of the brands that I honestly would consider pretty questionable. Because it's taught me everything that I want to be, that I don't want to be, and helped me understand the industry from the inside. You know, I've been on the inside of like the Walmarts and like all the consumer packaged good companies, and like really know the cultures and how that operates. And it's just it's fueled the fire a little bit, which is I think good in moderation.
Madeline, I believe you have your hand raised. Do you want to go ahead and ask?
Yeah. So you kind of half answered my question right now with that little spiel. It's amazing hearing about your whole like evolution in mindset and an approach to design. My question was really just about, with your current work now, how has it changed from your previous work? Like what type of brands now do you try to focus on, or is there a certain branch of work right now that you're really interested in? That was just my question.
Yeah, great question. How has my work changed? When I first came back to Toronto from being out west, I tried to go to a like typical agency. They hired me on. I was working on like Nike and some cannabis brands. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to do it. I lasted for 2 days and I was like, nope. The culture it destroyed me. I went back to my wife and was like, you know what, I can't do that again. So and it's all a choice. And I say all of this with like zero judgment, because I think it's all good experience as long as you go in like eyes wide open. But now I'm predominantly working for social impact clients. Right now I'm working for an organization that supports homeless youth. I am working with a couple of agencies that sort of play in the social profit space. So I've worked for like Alzheimer's Society. Who are some of the other clients recently? Like Doctors Without Borders, Amnesty International, things like that. So predominantly cause-based work, but certainly not exclusively. I also rebranded do I have one on my desk? No, I don't. A deodorant brand recently. It's like an all natural spray deodorant thing. And so I think what's changed is that I'm not I've like lost that ego drive that I had earlier in my career, where it was like, I need big brands, and I need a big salary, and I need a big title, and like that's gonna make this meaningful and make me be able to like prove to everyone that I'm successful. And I'm really working actively to dismantle all of those messages that I received throughout my entire life, and from family and the media around what it is that success looks like. And I've really learned that like a slightly slower pace is great for me, that working for brands that don't feel like shit. So that doesn't necessarily mean these brands are changing the world, but it means that like we at least align on some of it. And I can trust that they're going to be kind to the people that they work with, that they're not going to be, I'm not going to be complicit in something that is like a hard no for me by working with them. And so that's kind of what I've been up to these days. But I also remain super open. Like a brand reached out last week for some copywriting that was like an insurance company. So, you know, stuff comes along, and it's nice to have variety. I mean, it's one of the benefits really of consulting for sure.
So I wanted to bring up Roxanne, sorry. Go ahead, Roxanne, ask your questions.
Hi, sorry about that. I was just curious, in terms of if a brand approaches you, how do you figure out whether or not if they're like more like, I'm not quite sure how to word this, but more like moral, I would say, like more ethical. How do you figure that out about a brand when you research it? Because it's apparent that a lot of brands aren't necessarily gonna have their dirty laundry posted online. So how do you go about working with the brand and figuring out whether or not if they're ethical or not?
Mm-hmm. Look, that's the $1 million question. 100%. That is an amazing question. I'll go right up front. There's no right answer to it, and it's different for everybody because all of our sort of morals and values and ethics are going to vary. Our hard no's are going to vary. You know, some people, you know, Rupsha, did I say that right? Feels really badly about working for an alcohol brand. You know, I worked for an agency once that had cigarettes on their client list, like it was Benson and Hedges or whoever at one point. And I was like, that's a hard no. At the end of the day, I do my due diligence mostly online, I mean, I'll always like search their name plus controversy and things like that, just to see if there have been like any leaks, you know, anything in the news over the last few years. And I have managed to find a couple of interesting things by doing that and actually turn down some jobs. But for the most part, I think, you know, especially when we're working with big brands, we have a pretty good idea of who they are and what they're about. So that makes it a little bit easier. And then it becomes one of those questions about, you know, how can I affect change from the inside? I mean, certainly we're all only one person, and so there's only so much you can do. But you know, I was talking to a friend about this recently, how radical it can be to just show up as yourself in a space, you know, bringing your own lived experience, unabashedly being yourself, pushing back if there's, you know, ableist language being used, misogynist language, like all of these things, like you just don't know whose mind you're opening just a little bit by being that person in the room, you know. And that's not to say that, you know, turning down definitely happens, but I always think if we have the spoons, if anybody doesn't know what that means, Google spoon theory, have the spoons or the energy to put in the effort to go and push back. I think that is like a huge service that all of us can be doing to society, for society, and with society, on top of, you know, this amazing work that we're doing in, you know, designing all of this work and providing them with ethical design solutions and interventions as well, right? hopefully that answers it. So that's a tough question.
I'm sorry to throw that on you, but yeah.
No, it's amazing. That's what we want.
I think that what you suggested is great. I also do that, just because I'm nosy and I want to know. But I wanted to ask about your involvement with the RGD and how you've sort of become a part of the community. I know you've done a ton of work with the speaker guidelines, which are amazing, and it's really great to see that need for examples that aren't white dudes. Like that just made me really happy when I first joined the committee. So yeah, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so when I was first in my first design program ever, I was a provisional RGD. So that was my introduction to it. And then, of course, when I graduated, I had to like pay money, which I had none of at the time. And so it didn't happen for a few years until actually, I think just 2 years ago is when I was like, you know what, I've wanted to do this for ages. Why am I not just going for it, taking the test and you know, getting certified? And since having done that, I've got to say, the community has been amazing. I am part of and sort of lead the LGBTQ community group. If anybody wants to like be a part of that, we're on Slack and meet every so often. And on the DEI committee, and the openness and the collaboration in this group of people has been like off the charts. Didn't expect it. It's like you bring ideas and people are yes anding you on everything. And I don't know if that's, you know, because we're all designers and it's in our nature to co-create and collaborate, and we're all kind of hungry for it. And it's like this brainstorming mentality of just like building and building and building on ideas. But that has been, I think, the thing that surprised me the most. You know, I've been on like a couple of boards and, you know, volunteered in different projects, and group work can always go a lot of different ways, as we all know. You know, especially in school, I remember those days, but it's been awesome. So yeah, I've been really happy to do it. And like, I get to do stuff like this, so I can't complain about that.
That's amazing to hear. So much for sharing that. I wanted to ask you this. I'm still like, I'm gonna look into the spoon thing spoon theory that you mentioned. I've never heard it, so I'm gonna look it up. But,
yeah, check it out.
Yeah. So all the things that you mentioned and all your accomplishments, they're really great, and everyone, like I'm 100% sure that there's a lot of challenges came through your way. I wanted to ask what was the most challenging part of all this path that you take, and how did you overcome this challenge? Or if it's still there, you know?
Yeah. Do we ever overcome? I like to think that life is like a series of waves and then calm periods. And you never quite know when it's going to come. So I'll never quite say that I've like overcome or transcended any of it. I think the greatest, that is also a really good question, like the greatest challenge of all of it. You know what I think it honestly is, and I think this might come across as like a bit trite or cliche, but like believing in myself, you know, like, I don't know. I was not brought up in a place that was like, you are amazing. It was like, no, you accomplish a thing, you do it really well, and then we're going to maybe give you a little bit of like credit, but not too much, because we want you to do really well the next time too. And so I just like, I don't know. I spent most of my career in this state of like trying to prove something and never quite believing that I belonged in the room. That was another thing, is like, you know, as like a gender diverse person, when I became a creative director, the stat was that only 3% of creative directors were like cis women. That was nuts. And that wasn't that long ago. So even if you look at like that stat, you can get an idea of like how dominated the field was by like cis het white guys. Everybody looked the same. And like, I would walk into a room with other creative directors if we were doing like interagency collaborations, and I would be like, okay, like put on your strong face, like you're gonna have to do it. And then you go home and like cry because you were talked over all day, and no matter how hard you tried, like you couldn't get a word in. And it was a lot of that. So it's like really doing a lot of reading, especially now that we're talking so much about like systemic discrimination, and how much that has been present for so many different communities, and intersectionality is the feminism that we're all sort of living in now. It's a completely transformed world. And so I think all of those things combined with pushing through the sort of everyday things, like just being a human in the world, along with mental health struggles. Those would be kind of the big things. But I think it all does boil down to, no matter what it is that we face and any of those differences, we all belong in the room. Every last one of us has something amazing. And it wasn't really until I started doing like deeper research into co-creation and like inclusive methods of design that I was like, oh, right, like of course that's how you do it. Whereas previously it was like, the designer like walks in the room and is like, I am an expert, I'm going to tell you everything, this is how you're going to do it, and I know because I have the education and I'm amazing. Absolutely not. Now we're like facilitators. We go in, we ask good questions, like everyone here is asking kick-ass questions, because that's what we do. And then we take it and we synthesize and we make something incredible. But we've done it with community, not like telling people what they need anymore. It's just like it's transformed, and it's really exciting.
Wow, what an answer.
I guess
great.
That was my question. Before I ask my question, is there anyone else that has a question that would like to? Okay, Kendra, go ahead.
So just speaking on your experience as like, like being in like very non-diverse rooms, like being in those situations and in meetings when like you were talked over and such. I'm just wondering, are you feeling like that type of environment is changing now, or has it changed, or is it going to change? Yeah, like how's your experience with that like currently?
Yeah, I want to be really careful about saying it's changing, and I think it completely depends on like who we are and the different like intersections of identity that we're like coming to the table with as well. So I think there will always be challenges. I think there will always be discrimination that people are going to face, and that sucks. And also it's probably something that we're all going to have to learn to deal with in one way or another. However, I do think it's changing. And the closest anecdote that I can grasp at right now is 2 days ago, I was on the phone with an old colleague or on Zoom with an old colleague of mine, and we're collaborating on something. He's doing the strategy, I'm doing the creative direction. And he was asking me about the situation he found himself in. And I responded in a way that was like really honest. I said, listen, man, like you're a cis-het white dude, like you need to watch yourself. And he was like, whoa, and like really sat back. He's like, you're right. Like, and me saying that wasn't the first time he had heard that, right? He's like, it was like a reminder. There's an awareness about power structures and who has historically held so much of that power, that I do think things are changing. I also can see a lot of like pushback and like discomfort with it, almost like an avoidance of talking about it or looking at it. But I think the amount of discussion and discourse that's out there now is shifting things. I think it's going to take some time, but I would like to believe it's better now than it's ever been. And at least we're all talking about it. At least we have spaces like this. At least like, someone like me keeps getting called by like, regular agencies to do the work and come in because they're interested in a more, slightly more diverse approach, and that's a good thing. And I know there are, another example is, I don't know if you've heard of the designer creative director Ashley Mackenzie Barnes. She's like really up and coming, has I think been really involved in a lot of the Nuit Blanche stuff. She runs an agency called Dope. It's like black led and just like kicking ass, and I'm seeing her pop up everywhere. And what I hope is a very authentic desire to stop having this incredibly homogenous voice in like all of design and advertising, where the same voices, the same lived experience is getting repeated over and over again. Like, who really wants that? Like, I want to see what everybody's life looks like, and have that reflected in the work that we're creating. And so
thank you for answering that. It's I'm also very hopeful about the future, and yeah, it's really like heartening to hear that.
Awesome. Thank you.
That was actually going to be my question as well. And thank you, Kendra, for asking it so eloquently, better than I would have. But I think we may have to wrap up now. We have, like I said, a packed night, but Kelly, we are so thankful that you made the time and space for us today and answered some really great questions and shared so much of your journey. And it was really inspirational. And I hope we get to run into you again. I was just about to ask if we can follow you on social media. So you're one step ahead of me.
Feel free, reach out. Like, let's have a conversation. I live for this stuff. So like, please don't hesitate. I'm sure there's lots that we can like learn mutually from each other. So thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And for the rest of you, we will be adding that to minutes, so you will have access to it. And thank you again, Kelly, for dropping by tonight.
My pleasure. Take care, all.
Thank you so much. Bye.
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 Good night.